It's feeling like it's going to be one of those services, like just computer problems. I almost pulled off the whole keyboard. That was fun. All right, good morning. How are you guys doing? My wife, Jen, was supposed to be up here doing the announcements, but I don't see her. I'll make sure I don't, step on her. Okay, she's probably stuck because got the open house going on. And that's actually the first announcement I want to make sure I mention. Today, we are doing this open house of all the different spaces that we have been doing a renovation on over the last few weeks. Between our services today and after the service, this service, please check them out. The youth room back here, which was the kids' space before, that's been renovated. It's been very, very cool now for the Pizza with Jesus and all the activities they've got going over there. So please go in there and look at that. The preschool room's been updated. And then the space next door, the new building, is the new kids' room. And there's all kinds of cool rock climbing walls and basketball hoops. And we are passionate about kids and about the youth. And we've been investing in those ministries in those areas, and we'd love for you to see them and be a part of them. There's food in each one of those locations too, so you can kind of take your plate and go from room to room and stock up. So that's a bonus. And then also this Friday at 5 o'clock is going to be a kids' night out. So our K through 5, they're going to be able to come here for the building. Come to the building and hang out for the evening. So we would love for you to make sure that your kids, if they are involved in that age group and in that ministry, can come here for that night and hang out and be a part of the kids' night out. And parents, you get a couple of hours to just sleep or go to a movie or something. So anyway, thank you so much and have a great day at Shadow Rock.
Ryan, you can step in anytime. He does a great job. My name's Craig. I'm the lead pastor here. So happy you're here. Now, if you guys could just humor me a little bit this morning, go ahead and raise your right hand. Raise your right hand. All right. Whose hand is not up here? Okay. Raise your right hand and repeat after me. Pastor Craig, I promise that before I leave church today, I will tour all the really cool new environments that we've been working on the last couple of weeks. And I will be so excited of what God is doing here at Shadow Rock Church. All right. Now I'm going to hold you to it. You have pledged that you will go and tour all those environments. We hope that you have an opportunity to do that. We're having an open house in all of those spaces, and we're very, very excited about what God's doing here. And we're just making those really tangible investments into our kids and our students. Now, inside of your bulletin is a little card that looks like this, and it actually lists out some of the different things that we've done in the youth environment and the kids' environments, and I'd love to have you to have the opportunity to see that firsthand because it really is pretty cool. Now, there have been some people that have worked really, really hard to make this all come together, and I'm not sure they're all here today, but I'm going to invite them up. Craig Waters and Gary Armijo and Santino, if you guys can come on up here, Santino here. These guys have been working all night, early in the morning, and every time they show up here at church, they are assigned a new project. Oh yeah, we got to do this, and we got to make that happen. And they have done an amazing job just pulling all that together, and we just wanted to let you guys know how much we really, really appreciate you. And we've got kind of a small token of our appreciation. We gave this to you in the first service, but this time you actually get to keep it. But we love you very, very much and appreciate each and every one of you. So, Gary, thank you so much. Craig, love you guys. Thank you. Love you, man. Those guys are amazing. Well, every week we celebrate a time of giving, and this is time when we volunteer our time and our talents and our money, and this is just an expression of that. We're a church that doesn't want to be known for what we take for ourselves. We want to be known for what we give away, and we consider this an investment not only into the students here, but the students throughout our entire community. And we have students from La Quinta High School and John Glenn Middle School and all the elementary schools. They're all coming here to connect, and you guys are a part of that, and you're changing lives. And so I cannot thank you enough for your generosity. Really, when you give to this church, you're not giving to this church, you're giving through this church to be a blessing. And we invite you to be part of a movement that is centered around a message that's been changing the world for 2,000 years. And It's more than just a kind of a club of a church that you kind of come and attend. It's a place where you really can affect and change lives. So thank you so much for investing your time, money, and energy to resource this message to people. Pray with me, and let's just ask the Lord to bless our church and bless this offering as we receive it. Lord, thank you so much for this opportunity that we have to worship you with our giving. And Lord, we just want to celebrate all the wonderful new environments that we've created for our students and our kids. Lord, that happens because of the generosity of the people that are sitting in this room. They make ministry possible here at Shadow Rock. It cannot work without all of our partnership as you use us and empower us through your Spirit. And so, Lord, I just celebrate them, and I celebrate this wonderful opportunity we have to give with joy because of the wonderful things that you've already given to us. And we commit it all to you in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Who am I that the highest King would welcome me? And I was lost, but he brought me. Oh, his love for me. Yes, his love for me. Who the Son sets free. Oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. Free at last, he has ransomed me. Oh, his grace mercy. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me. Yes, he died for me. Who the Son sets free. Oh, it's free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. Oh, I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. Yes, I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. Oh, I am who you say I am. Oh, yes, I am who you say I am. The Son sets free. Oh, it's free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I invite you to stand. Let's sing it together. In my Father's house. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. Who the Son? Who the Son sets free. Oh, it's free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. Oh, I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. Oh, I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. Oh, I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. Yes, oh, I am who you say I am. I am, yes, I am who you say I am. I am, oh, I am who you say I am. Who the Son sets free. Oh, it's free indeed. I'm a child
guys sound fantastic. I love it when you sing. Go ahead and be seated. I'm so happy you're here. Let me take a minute and welcome those that may be joining us online live, which you can do so at our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Shadow Rock Church. You can also access that same live feed from our website, which is... You got it. I'm so proud of you guys. Hey, and by the way, if you are new with us today, in the seat pocket in front of you, this little Connect card, if you want to take a minute and fill that out, you're not like signing on to commit to our church or anything like that, but we'd love to just recognize your visit. Your time's really valuable to you, I'm sure, and to us, and we really care that you're here. If you want to take this card back to the back, we'd love to give you a free Shadow Rock Church mug. Just in honor of your being with us today. Well, we are thrilled that you are here. God's doing some great things in our church, and we're just really excited this morning. We're starting a brand new conversation that we're calling Perspectives. And perspective has real power. Now, as you look at that title slide, you'll notice a little picture up there. How many of you would say, I see a rabbit there? I see a rabbit. Anybody? Nobody sees a rabbit. Wow, that's a first. A couple of you see a rabbit. How many of you see a duck? You see a duck? Well, if you see a duck, try and see a rabbit. The duck's bill is actually ears. If you see a rabbit, try seeing a duck. Because perspective really does have power. And the way that you see your world really does begin to inform your attitude, your decisions, and maybe your rabbit is actually a duck in your life. I'm going to read off a couple of different perspectives. I just typed these up, and just to kind of highlight how important perspective really is. So this is perspective number one. Everybody say perspective number one. All right, my children are gone. I no longer hear the laughter and energy of teenagers running around my home. It's all downhill from here. I'm almost 50, and it's hard to imagine how fast life is going. I'm feeling older every day. Even my hair is starting to thin. I started a church 10 years ago, and I thought it would be a lot bigger and more developed. When we moved out to California, I lost our dream house in Missouri during our downturned 2008 economy. It's so hot here. I thought the church would be running thousands of people by now and be planting even more churches. I can't believe we don't even own our own building. Instead, we're stuck in a lease. It's so difficult and expensive to buy property. No one will even talk to us as we try to buy other properties. Even my parents must have known I wouldn't amount to much. As a middle child, they left me at a rest stop. So that's perspective number one. Let me read perspective number two. Everybody say perspective number two. My children are gone. I can't believe that in just a couple of years, they will finally be off the payroll. What an amazing opportunity for Tricia and I to travel and enjoy our marriage. It's also fantastic to see how wonderful our children have grown up. At almost 50, I have a lot more wisdom and still some health and vitality to make the most out of this season of my life. My hair is a little thinner, but at least I have some locks of beautiful brown hair to comb and style. Many of my friends my age don't have any hair at all. I started a church 10 years ago. I was able to buy a beautiful home for an amazing deal during the housing crisis of 2008. I love California where there is no humidity. The beach and forest are so close. Our church has had a miracle happen where we were able to lease property right on Highway 111. Other pastors can't believe we were able to get property in such an amazing location. Leasing is so much better right now because we can move or expand as we grow. So many people have connected with God through our wonderful, healthy church. And as a middle child, I'm more well-adjusted and personable, so I can enjoy this wonderful season of my life. Now, here's the interesting thing about those two perspectives. Did circumstances change? No. Circumstances were exactly the same, but perspective changed. And perspective has real power. Just in the way you see your life, just in the way that you look at your situation, it has real power to inform your decisions and your attitudes. And you may be here, I even wrote down some different perspectives. If you're single, perspective number 1, no one loves me. Perspective number 2, I can give and love others more freely. If you're in a job you hate, perspective number 1 says, I hate my job, my life is miserable. Perspective number 2 is, I'm in a job that provides for me and my family while I look for a better job. My kids are unruly. Perspective number 1 says, I wish my kids would show more respect. What's wrong with me? Perspective number 2, I have kids when other people can't. I have a bad diagnosis. Perspective number 1 says, I'm scared and uncertain about my health. Perspective number 2 says, I'm looking forward to heaven. But in the meantime, I can demonstrate God's grace and offer compassion to others while I go through treatment. Maybe you're here and you would say you're divorced. Perspective number 1 says, I'm a failure. Even my spouse left me. Perspective number 2, I have an opportunity to show compassion and restoration to the millions of people suffering from a divorce. Did circumstances change? Nope. Perspective changed, and that changed everything. How you see something really does inform how you look at your world and the attitude that you have to different situations. Philosopher Blaise Pascal said it this way in the 17th century. He says, there is enough light for those who choose to see and enough darkness for those who are of a contrary disposition. And the interesting thing is, we all can choose our perspective. You can choose how you see things, and that begins to change everything. And we all had moments where we've had those radical changes of perspectives. Maybe it's through the loss of a loved one or the loss of a job, or maybe, you've been in a church service like this and something's being communicated and you're like, oh my word, this is for me. And suddenly it feels like you're the only person in the room. Or maybe you're looking up into the sky and you see the millions of stars and you're just awestruck at how big the universe is and how much bigger God must be. And suddenly you feel really small and at the same time really valuable to a God who is so big. There's moments where we just have this change of perspective in the way that we see things, and it just changes everything. Well, Paul was really familiar with these changes of perspectives. In fact, Paul was known as Saul. He was born a man named Saul, and he persecuted these early Christians. And on the road to Damascus, he was knocked off his horse, what he described as a blinding light. And suddenly he was physically blind. And someone came and prayed for him, and physically his eyes were open, but more importantly, spiritually his eyes were open, and he saw the world radically differently. All because of an encounter with Jesus. And so when he talks about a change of perspective, he really does know knows what he's talking about. And he highlights this in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7. He says it this way: we have this treasure in jars of clay to show this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. And then he goes on to talk about some of the things that he's experienced in his own life, that we have this treasure of God's presence inside of our frail little life. And he says, I'm hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed. I'm perplexed, but not in despair. I am persecuted, but not abandoned. I am struck down, but not destroyed. And as he goes through that list, I think it's a list that most of us here probably can relate with on some level. you know what it's like to be hard-pressed on every side. And your family wants a part of you, and your spouse wants a part of you, and your job wants a part of you, and you feel pulled this way and that way financially, and you're just struck every single way, and you're just like, I just can't hardly do this, and you just feel like giving up. Or maybe you've been perplexed, and you've asked God tough questions, and you seemingly can't not find the answers. And you've tried, but these doubts and these questions, they plagued your mind, and you're just like, I just don't know how to break through. There's things that are happening in my life, and I'm looking for God to shine his light, but I am dumbfounded right now. Or maybe you feel persecuted, and you've tried to do the right thing and make good decisions, but it seems like instead of being rewarded for your good decisions and your good behavior, you're punished. And for whatever reason, it seems like everybody just kind of skates through life scot-free without taking any kind of responsibility for the decisions they make. And here you are trying to do the right thing, and you're ultimately getting punished for it. And it seems like the world is just suddenly upside down. Or maybe you feel struck down. You know, the interesting word there in the original language, it's actually written in Aramaic, and it's a word that means foundation. It's struck down, but it's like the foundation. And sometimes these tragedies and the times when we're perplexed and the times that we're hard-pressed, they ultimately can become the foundation where God can build something bigger. But Paul found a strength in difficult times, all because he had a radical change of perspective. And he goes on to talk about the secret to gaining that perspective. He said that this way, and it's really reflects on how your death and contemplating your death can completely change your life. 2 Corinthians 5:10 says, we always carry around in our body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may be revealed in our body. Yesterday morning at 11 o'clock, we had an amazing celebration of a life of someone that's been a part of our church the last couple of years. Her name is Colette Rosowski, and she was an amazing, kind, generous woman. Many people have come and spoke how she just went around and tried to elevate people's spirits in every way that she can. She actually served in our youth ministry for a while. Just an amazing person. But it's interesting, when I do funerals, it's one of those times that people have a shift in perspective. Because all of the things that we chase after, they don't really matter that much at the end of your life. You know, it doesn't really matter what car you drove. It didn't matter how big and expensive your house was. It didn't matter like how beautiful or handsome you were. It doesn't matter at all how many zeros in your bank account. It didn't matter how successful or influential you were in your job. In fact, it's interesting when someone retires, it's amazing how that influence just evaporates when you're not the boss anymore. But certainly at the end of a person's life, all of those things that had such importance suddenly doesn't anymore. You know, the only thing that matters, and fortunately Colette really did live her life this way. The only thing that matters is, did you love God? And did you love people? That's it. How did you love God? And how did you love people? Because suddenly the perspective changes from what happened temporarily on this earth to what is happening eternally with God in heaven. Because there are some things that you do take with you. And I think we need to look at the big picture. And, Paul talks a lot about just looking at the big picture. In fact, in verse 16, it says, therefore we do not lose heart. When we're going through all these things, because we have an eternal perspective, we don't lose heart. And many times we're just looking at this little small window of time, but we have a whole eternity that might change how we make decisions and the attitudes that we have. So to kind of illustrate this, I've got some really zoomed in pictures, and we're going to see if we can kind of figure out what these zoomed in pictures are, because sometimes we're looking at it so closely that we can't see the bigger picture. And so we might have to dim the lights a little bit for this, but can you guys play along with me? All right, you guys ready? All right, so this is my first zoomed in picture. Does anybody know what this zoomed in picture is? If you had to guess what this zoomed in picture is, it just looks really tasty, doesn't it? What is that? Anybody have a guess? What? A cactus? No. Asparagus? Licorice? A what? A fly leg. Well, that's a good guess. Let's see what it is. It's actually an apple. An apple. So who would have known? You know, you've zeroed in real close, and then you blow it up, and you're like, oh, it's not quite what I thought it was. Let's try another one. Anybody know what this is? What is it? A soda pot, a pull tab on top of a can. Let's see if you're right. Oh, wow. Give yourselves a hand. That's fantastic. You did good. Let's try another one here. Anybody know what this is? Anybody say zebra? What? A Crayola crayon. Not a crown, a crayon. All right, here it is. There it is. You're right. Let's look at the next one. Anybody? This is me smiling. Anybody know what it is? An Oreo cookie. Let's see if you are right. You are correct. Zoomed in. Doesn't quite look as appetizing. All right. Anybody know what this is? This is a little tougher. A little seaweed. No. What? Chocolate cake? No. Jerky? No. Anybody else? A countertop? No, not exactly. Let's see what it is. It's actually an almond. Almond. You just zoomed in so close you can't quite see what that is. And here's the thing. We can go ahead and turn on the lights again. Here's the thing. Sometimes in our life, we're looking at what's happening today in my little world right at this moment, and we're looking at such a small little zoomed in picture. And when we step out and look at it within the span and context of eternity, suddenly things change. And we begin to see things entirely different. Jim Elliot said this. He said, "He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose." Now, if you're looking at this little small window of time, your little few decades here on this earth, that doesn't make sense, does it? It doesn't make sense to be generous, to give your life away, to even surrender your life for a bigger calling. It just simply doesn't make sense. But if you look at your life in the span of eternity, well, suddenly that makes complete sense. It's entirely logical. And there's 4 commitments of gaining an eternal perspective that Paul offers, and I want to just walk through them just a little bit. The first one is, my weakness is an opportunity for strength. Verse 16 of 2 Corinthians 4, it says, though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we're being renewed day by day. We have this treasure in jars of clay. The interesting thing about jars of clay is sometimes they would put a light in jars of clay, and even though it doesn't seem like it'd be light permeable, it is. And light begins to shine through, and light shines through the cracks. In fact, it's quite beautiful. I happened to visit the Blue Mosque. It was originally built to be a cathedral in Istanbul, Turkey. And it's interesting because the windows are marble, but they're polished so thin that light permeates through them, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. These potteries, these jars of clay are a little bit like that, and it's interesting that light begins to shine through the imperfections in that clay jar. And it's interesting because God's grace often shines through, not in the areas that we're most strong, and it's usually in the areas that we might view as a vulnerability or a weakness. Now, I talk about it all the time. I'm an emotionally driven person. I am am rather introspective sometimes. Much of my time is just spent trying to intellectually process the weight of my emotions and trying to manage it. I get emotionally depleted sometimes pretty easy. And for much of my life, I considered that a weakness. And I would hear about people, they're just kind of happy-go-lucky, and they're the life of the party, and I'm like, oh, I wish I could be like them. That would be so much better. Instead, it feels like I have this anchor around my neck of this just kind of emotional weight that I have to kind of navigate through. Prone to depression, prone to anxiety, and I always hated that. But here's the interesting thing that has happened in my life over the last several years. Suddenly I began to realize that area of my life that I've always viewed perhaps as a weakness, I can leverage it as a strength. Because I can get inspired and get creative, and then I just work everybody into the ground, and I have energy coming out of my ears because I'm inspired. And you know what else? I really genuinely care about people. And Trish came to me and she goes, oh, Craig, you're so good at funerals. And I go, well, that's because I genuinely care. I put together those pictures and slideshows all myself because I want to connect emotionally with this person's life. And I only maybe knew them in this last few years of their life. And suddenly I see them as a little child and in their dad's arms and in their mom's arms as they're growing up. And it gives me a brand new perspective. And I want to connect with that on some level. And I begin to see that all of that I may have viewed as a weakness can be leveraged and used as a strength where God shines brightly through me. And it's true of you. You may be a really strong, kind of tough person, and maybe you have a propensity towards anger, but you can use that weakness and leverage it and leverage that strength in a way where maybe you can lead whole teams and lead ministries and really set direction and be passionate and fight for people who can't fight for themselves. You have an opportunity to leverage what maybe you viewed as a weakness and use it as a strength. You know, outwardly we're wasting away, but inwardly we're being renewed day by day. It's the opportunity that God has to redeem those weaknesses inside of our life and shine brighter still, even in those areas of susceptibility. Number two, the second commitment of having an eternal perspective, it says this: my troubles are an opportunity to build character. Now, whenever I say that, if you're in trouble right now and you're going through a hard time, that is not what you want to hear. And I just come around and I'm like, well, it's an opportunity to build your character. I mean, don't you just love hearing that? And it just makes you feel so great. But here's the reality. It's true. And I think probably each one of us can look back through the course of our life and we can look at those failures and those hard times and those places in our life where we were really hurting. We can look back and on some level appreciate them because they made us stronger and they helped us to have true character. You see, I think true character isn't developed just in the good times of our life. True character is developed in the forge and the crucible, going back to the jars of clay metaphor, the crucible of our life. The times when it's so hot and the pressure is on us and we just simply don't know what to do. That's when the beauty of God as the master potter, as the master craftsman, the artist is working in our life. 2 Corinthians 4:17 says, for our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. You see, Paul stopped looking at the adversity, and he had a lot of adversity. In fact, Christian tradition tells us that by the end of his life, he was just hunched over like this, not able to stand up straight because of the numerous severe beatings that he had received. He was actually stoned, what they thought, to death, and miraculously God saved him. He knew what trouble was, but he says, I endure hardship as the discipline of a God who loves me and who has adopted me as a son into his family. Suddenly, because he has an eternal perspective, he begins to view trouble as not a place where you just step back and you're like, woe is me, and engage in a bunch of self-pity. But he started to view trouble as an opportunity for something called growth. These are the places where you grow in an eternal perspective. That my light and momentary troubles are helping me have a stronger eternal kind of perspective, a glory that's going to far outweigh them all. The third commitment of someone who has an eternal perspective is our small problems will never hide the bigger reality. Kind of a common statement that we might make is the things that matter most must never be at the mercy of the things that matter least. And how often does that happen? Where we just get distracted and chase after things that at the end of the day, and certainly at the end of our life, they don't matter that much. So Paul said we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. For we live by faith, not by sight. He just says, kind of as he's continuing this thought into the next chapter. And sometimes my small problems begin to hide the bigger reality, and we get so myopic into what's happening right now at this season of our life, and we just can't see anything else, and we become very self-absorbed, and we can't see anybody else's problems or emotionally connect with anything that anybody else is going through because I have real problems. And those small problems just begin to narrow our focus so that we can only see us. And that's a tragedy because there's a great big world that's out there. As we start to look with an eternal perspective, we see, you know what? Maybe these things aren't that big a deal. And I need to look at this bigger picture of what God is trying to reveal to me and understand that I'm just a work in progress. And finally, the last commitment that a person makes when they want to gain an eternal perspective is they say, my temporary treasures must never be valued more than eternal riches. You see, one of the things I alluded to in that last point is we become very kind of selfish, self-absorbed, and we look at our temporary treasures and we try to amass all this stuff around us, and we live only for now. We live for what the Bible would describe as our temporary world. Our temporary wealth, our temporary stuff. None of these things are you going to be able to take with you. But the Bible records that there are some things that you can take with you, that you can store up riches in heaven. And here's the principle. It's not how much you have, but it's what you do with what you have that really matters. It's not how much you have that really matters. It's what you do with what you have. How have you leveraged what God has placed in your hand to invest into eternity and to invest into somebody's life that makes a big, big difference? A few years ago, I took a trip. And I took a trip to Haiti with Convoy of Hope. Convoy of Hope is this ministry, and they're really the first responders to disasters and emergencies all around the world. And I was so impacted because there's just extreme poverty. Haiti has never really recovered from the earthquake that they suffered many years ago now. And they had children running around everywhere who were just simply orphaned, who literally were starving to death. Can you imagine? And so these ministries like Convoy of Hope came in and they offered help and they began feeding some of these children who would have died without this intervention. And one of the people that we toured, one of the ministries we toured was a school that was led by a lady by the name of Sherry Fossey. And Sherry impacted my life so much. I actually took a picture with her that is on the screen. But Sherry started this school in 2000. She lived in kind of the southeastern part of the state, and she just sold everything and moved to Haiti full-time to start the school. And when I showed up and I'm looking at this school, there were hundreds of Haitian children that were part of this education, and they all had uniforms, and she was feeding them and housing them in many cases. and just providing them a very high-class education. In fact, when we came in to tour, she was greatly concerned that somehow we would interrupt what they were doing. She wasn't sure she even wanted to let us tour the facility because she was so committed to these students. But we were walking past all of these classrooms, and just truly an amazing, heroic woman. And I walked past one of the classrooms, and the entire class was signing. They were using sign language, and there was a teacher, and they were communicating in them sign language. And I love deaf people, and I turned to Sherry, and I'm like, oh, it's so fantastic. You have deaf people who attend your school. I think that's wonderful. And she just looked back at me, and she said, well, they're not deaf. But through all of the poverty, people have been getting medications, and they think a little, they don't understand that you're supposed to take a dose of this medication, and they think, well, this medication's helping me, I should just take more. And one of the side effects of some of these medications is we have thousands of people who have lost their hearing because they simply don't know what dosage of the medication to take. And so we have this huge deaf population in Haiti. And she said something to me that just literally blew me away. She said, when these students in this classroom, they grow up and they're going to be doctors and pastors and they're going to be attorneys and they're going to rebuild Haiti. When they grow up, they need to know sign language so that they can minister to all the deaf kids. You see, this is somebody who had an eternal perspective, who had the long view of what was taking place in her life and what she was going to do, who said, you know what, because I have an eternal perspective, selling everything, moving to Haiti full-time, starting a school, teaching, hearing kids to learn sign language, that matters. If you have a real temporary view, you don't see that. But Sherry did. And it's the view that I hope you have as well. You see, Jesus offered this in the Sermon on the Mount, and I wanted to just read it because he's talking about this eternal perspective in Luke chapter 6. It says, looking at the disciples, he said, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you who hunger now, for you will be satisfied. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh. Blessed are you when people hate you, when they exclude you and they assault you and reject you, your name as evil because of the Son of Man. Rejoice in that day and leap for joy, because great is your reward in heaven." It only makes sense if you see your world from an eternal perspective. I'm going to ask you to do something in response to this message. I'm going to ask you to look inside of your bulletin and just simply pull out this card, because I'm going to ask you to do something courageous that highlights this eternal perspective. You see, our church took a huge step of faith because we saw some of the things that we'd like to do with children, some of the things we'd like to do with students, some of the impact we're making, like with FCA, and we simply said we need environments for these students that are really cool. And we went through a video series and talked about momentum, and one of the metaphors that they use is these ugly couches that are in your house sometimes, and you just go blind to them, and you're like, oh, that looks fine. But guests come into your house, and they're like, oh, my word, that's the ugliest couch I've ever seen. You know what I'm talking about? And so we began asking the question, what's some ugly couches? Even in our narrative and what we present, what's some things that make sense to us because we just kind of go blind to it, but for a guest walking in, it's an ugly couch. And we started asking, it was interesting because most of what we began pointing to had to do with the aesthetics of the room. And we kind of thought, we'll lease this space for a little bit, and then we'll go and we'll build something else. And we didn't anticipate being here even this long. And so it was kind of a hard conversation. But we said, you know what? We need to be faithful with what God's given us right now. And when people walk in here, there's something a message that we want to convey to every single person, that God loves them, that God values them, that we care. And part of that has to do even with the environment that we have. I used to take my kids on Tuesday morning. We went to this little breakfast place, and it wasn't that nice place. And suddenly we went to Starbucks, and my kids like opened up, and we're laughing, and we're drinking coffee. And suddenly it dawned on me, environment matters. And we wanted to create environments where students could connect around booths and have nice, comfortable seating, and kids could have a climbing wall and games and ping pong tables, because really we just wanted families to know this is the place for you. We really care about you. And we just wanted to make a significant investment in families. And it's not because we have a big money tree in our backyard. It's just simply because we said, you know what? I think God's leading us to do it. Let's just invest in this. And so we did. And I think as you look at some of the spaces, you'll see kind of the heart behind it, the love behind it. We care about families. We care about our children. We care about our students. And for many of us in this room, your kids are long gone. You never go in these spaces. It really doesn't affect you until you have an eternal perspective. And you begin to realize, you know what? My little small investment into that person's life, that little kid's life, that student's life, that could change everything for them. And you begin to walk in the same steps of Sherry Fossey, who left everything just because she had that eternal perspective, moves down to Haiti, starts a school. You start to say, you know what? My life has to matter, not only for right now, not just for myself. My life has to matter for eternity. And you start to take the long view. And so that's what we've been doing. And this card represents an opportunity that I wanted to extend to you to invest in this project. We're trying to raise $40,000 to recoup some of the money that we've already invested into some of these environments for our kids and students. And so I'd like to invite you to really prayerfully consider, how can I make that investment? How can I make an investment and store up riches in heaven? You know, someone came to me, they saw the big old inflatable out here, and they're like, oh, it's so cool for the open house. We rented an inflatable. And I was so happy to be able to say, actually, that's ours. We bought it. That's something that's a permanent fixture now for us, that we have a place for these children to come and laugh and play, and families hopefully to sit when it's not so hot. But we just wanted to make that investment into our kids, and I want to invite you to make that investment too. And so for the next 3 months, maybe just above what you normally give to the church, you can just say, you know what, I want to make this investment. And I'm going to maybe give weekly to it, or maybe some of you can write even one check towards it. Maybe some of you can even write a substantial check. Like I said, we're trying to raise $40,000. And like I say all the time, we really don't feel like this is something you're just giving to us and we're trying to build this empire. It's not hard, and I hope you understand that. We really, really want to impact our whole community, and we feel like this is just an essential part of that. And so prayerfully consider what you might want to do, and our ushers are going to come, and they're going to collect these cards, so when you're prepared, you can just pass them to the aisle. But before you do that, let me just pray for us. Lord, thank you so much for this great church. Thank you for helping to change our perspective, to help us have an eternal perspective. Lord, some of the things we may do may make no sense to anybody else. They don't understand. Well, why would you give that amount of money? And why would you volunteer so much? And how come you're doing that? And just simply because they don't see it. They don't see their life within the picture of eternity. And so, Lord, I pray that you would help us to capture an eternal perspective. And I thank you for this wonderful, wonderful, generous church every single time. Lord, they've just shown up in so many powerful ways to change lives and to say, you know what? Let's allow Shadow Rock Church to be that beacon of God's grace, to be that beacon of light into every dark spot in our community. And so, Lord, I thank you for every person that really prayerfully and sacrificially invest into this project, into eternity. I thank you for it in the name of Jesus. Amen. Amen. Our ushers are coming to collect those cards. Just pass them to the center aisle if you would. And if you're not prepared to do anything today, maybe you want to talk about it or pray about it, I invite you to do that. There's certainly no pressure whatsoever. But I just believe many of you want to make that investment into eternity, into our future. Hey, I want to invite you as well to invite somebody to come back with you next week. We're going to continue this conversation on perspective. You do not want to miss it. We're going to have a lot of fun with it, and it's just going to be, I think, really practical kinds of things that'll help us to see our world differently. Be sure to invite somebody to join you, because we really do believe everybody's life would be better with God in it. And maybe you're here and you want to start a relationship with Christ today. I would love to talk to you personally. We've got some wonderful resources back at the back. There's a great ministry called Right Now Media that's available online. 40,000 different video Bible studies. And, I mean, you can almost type in anything and some great teaching is going to come up. And it's just one of the ways that Shadow Rock Church is investing in you. We love you and we appreciate you. We just believe God wants to do something truly spectacular in your life. And all of you pledged earlier, you might remember, you pledged to me that you would not leave Shadow Rock Church today without touring all of these wonderful new environments. So we invite you to do that now. There's food in all of these spaces. God bless you. We'll see you next week at Shadow Rock.